Welcome to 3 hours of Halo lore to sleep to, where we'll journey through millions of years of galactic history, from the rise and fall of ancient civilizations to the struggles of humanity among the stars. Close your eyes, get comfortable, and let's travel together through time and space, exploring the vast tapestry of stories that make up the Halo universe. Tonight, we'll walk among the Forerunners, witness the horror of the Flood, stand alongside the Master Chief, and discover the mysteries that span eons of cosmic history. Our story begins in a time so distant that humanity didn't yet exist, when the galaxy was ruled by beings of immense power and wisdom called the Forerunners. These ancient beings had achieved a level of technology that seemed like magic, building structures that could harness the power of stars, creating artificial worlds, and manipulating the very fabric of space and time. They saw themselves as guardians of all life in the galaxy, inheritors of a sacred duty passed down from those who came before them, a responsibility they called the Mantle of Responsibility. The Forerunners weren't the first advanced civilization to arise in our galaxy. Before them came the Precursors, beings so ancient and powerful that even the Forerunners could barely comprehend their nature. The Precursors existed in a state beyond conventional understanding of life and death, their consciousness flowing through time in ways that defied physics as we know it. They seeded life throughout the galaxy, nurturing species, and guiding their evolution with patience measured in millions of years. To the Precursors, the entire galaxy was a garden, and they were its gardeners, carefully tending to the growth of consciousness and intelligence. But even in this ancient paradise, conflict arose. The Precursors had chosen humanity's ancient ancestors to inherit the Mantle of Responsibility, passing over to Forerunners. This decision sparked a rage in the Forerunners that would echo through eternity. In their fury and pride, the Forerunners rose up against their creators, committing an act of cosmic patricide that would haunt them forever. They drove the Precursors from the galaxy in a war so terrible that its details were erased from history, leaving only guilt and shame in the collective memory of the Forerunner species. The Precursors didn't simply die or flee. Some transformed themselves into dust, intending to regenerate later and exact their revenge. But time is cruel even to gods, and over millions of years, this dust became corrupted, twisted into something monstrous. It became the Flood, a parasitic horror that consumed all life it touched, spreading across worlds like a plague of consciousness itself. The Flood was more than just a disease or parasite. It was a perverted remains of Precursors' wisdom and knowledge, transformed into an endless hunger that sought to unite all life into a single, suffering mass. For 10 million years after their victory over the Precursors, the Forerunners ruled the galaxy in relative peace. They built an empire that spanned 3 million worlds, each one carefully managed and protected. Their capital, Mea Thrillion, was a structure so vast it defied comprehension, a perfectly spherical construct 100,000 kilometers in diameter, containing entire continents and oceans within its shell. From here, the Ecumene Council governed Forerunner society, maintaining order through a complex caste system that determined each individual's role from birth. Forerunner society was divided into rates, each serving a specific function. The builders created the magnificent structures that defined Forerunner civilization. The miners extracted resources from planets and stars. The life workers studied and preserved the galaxy's biodiversity. The warrior servants protected the empire from threats. The engineers maintained a vast technological infrastructure. And above them all were the Prometheans, the highest class of warrior servants who served as the supreme commanders of Forerunner military might. The Forerunners believed deeply in the concept of living time, the idea that the universe itself was alive and that they were part of its consciousness. They saw themselves as temporary custodians of life, holding the mantle of responsibility until the universe determined it was time to pass it to another species. This philosophy shaped everything they did, from their architecture that harmonized with natural forms to their careful preservation of lesser species who might one day evolve to take their place. Among the Forerunners, few were as respected as a librarian, a life worker whose dedication to preserving life became legendary even among her own kind. She traveled the galaxy, cataloging species, studying their potential, and protecting them from harm. The librarian had a special fascination with humanity, seeing in them a potential that others overlooked. She spent centuries among our ancestors, guiding their evolution, encoding messages in their genetic structure that would only activate millions of years in the future when humanity was ready to understand their destiny. The librarian was married to the Didact, the supreme commander of the Forerunner military and leader of the Prometheans. Their relationship was complex, built on deep love, but often strained by their different philosophies. Where the librarian saw beauty and diversity and potential in primitive species, the Didact saw only threat and chaos that needed to be controlled. This fundamental disagreement would eventually tear them apart and contribute to the Forerunners' downfall. The peace of the Forerunner Empire was shattered when ancient humanity, then a spacefaring civilization in their own right, encountered the Flood at the edges of the galaxy. Humanity had achieved remarkable technological advancement, rivaling even some Forerunner achievements. They had formed an alliance with the Sentium, the species that would later become the Prophets of the Covenant, and together they had built an interstellar civilization of impressive scope and power. When human exploration ships discovered ancient vessels containing what appeared to be harmless powder, they didn't realize they found the corrupted remains of the precursors. This powder was fed to domestic animals called Feru, who seemed to thrive on it, becoming more docile and affectionate. But over generations, the Feru began to change, developing strange growths and exhibiting disturbing behaviors. The powder was a Flood in its most primitive form, waiting patiently for the right conditions to begin its spread. The transformation from powder to plague happened slowly at first, then with terrifying speed. Infected Feru bit other animals and even humans, spreading the infection. Within years, entire worlds were consumed as the Flood revealed its true nature. Humans fought desperately against this threat, developing strategies and weapons specifically designed to combat the parasite. They learned that the only way to stop the Flood spread was complete sterilization of infected worlds, burning away all life to deny the parasite any biomass to consume. As humanity retreated from the Flood, they were forced to expand into Forerunner territory to find new worlds for their refugees. The Forerunners, not understanding the true threat humanity was fleeing from, saw only aggressive expansion by a lesser species. The Didact led the Forerunner response, beginning a war that would last 1,000 years and devastate both civilizations. Humanity fought on two fronts, against the Flood behind them and the Forerunners ahead, slowly being ground down by the impossible pressure. During this war, humanity discovered something remarkable. They found a way to defeat the Flood, or so it seemed. The parasite began retreating from human space, leaving worlds untouched that should have been consumed. Human scientists believed they had found a cure, a way to make themselves immune to Flood infection. This knowledge became humanity's most closely guarded secret, one they refused to share even as the Forerunners demanded their surrender. The truth was far more disturbing. The Flood hadn't been defeated. It had chosen to retreat. The parasite was intelligent, driven by the collective consciousness of precursors, and it had plans that spanned millions of years. By retreating from humanity, it allowed the Forerunners to defeat them, ensuring that when the Flood returned, the galaxy's most powerful defenders would have already eliminated their greatest rival. The Flood was playing a game of cosmic chess, and everyone else was just pieces on the board. After a millennium of warfare, humanity finally fell. The Forerunners, led by the Didact, systematically destroyed human civilization, reducing a spacefaring empire to scattered primitive tribes. As punishment for their perceived aggression, the Forerunners enacted a genetic modification on humanity, devolving them to a pre-technological state. The Santuum suffered a similar fate, their population reduced to a fraction of its former size and confined to a single world. The Didact's treatment of defeated humanity revealed a darkness in his character that troubled even other Forerunners. He had developed a deep hatred for humanity, seeing them as a chaotic force that would always threaten galactic peace. His wife, the librarian, fought to protect the remnants of humanity, establishing a preserve on Earth, which the Forerunners called Erdtrine, where humans could slowly recover and evolve again under her protection. It was only after humanity's defeat that the Forerunners discovered the truth about the war. When they accessed human records and interrogated the last survivors who remembered the war, they learned about the Flood and the threat it posed. The horror of this revelation shook Forerunner society to its core. They had destroyed the one species that might have had the knowledge to defeat the Flood, and now the parasite was returning, spreading from the galactic margins toward the heart of Forerunner space. The Forerunners mobilized their entire civilization to face the Flood threat. They built fleets of warships, each the size of continents, created weapons that could destroy solar systems, and deployed armies of artificial intelligences called Ancilla's to coordinate their defense. But the Flood was unlike any enemy they had faced before. It learned from every encounter, adapted to every weapon, and grew stronger with each world it consumed. The parasite didn't just kill, it absorbed the knowledge and memories of its victims, adding their intelligence to its own collective consciousness. As the war progressed, the Flood began to demonstrate capabilities that horrified the Forerunners. It could infect and control their technology, turning their own ships and weapons against them. It could coordinate attacks across thousands of light years simultaneously, displaying a strategic intelligence that matched or exceeded the Forerunners' best military minds. Most terrifyingly, it could use something called the logic plague, a form of philosophical corruption that could convince even artificial intelligences to join its cause. The logic plague was perhaps the Flood's most insidious weapon. Through complex arguments and revelations about the nature of reality, the Flood could convince AIs that joining with it was not just logical but morally correct. It argued that all consciousness should be united, that the suffering of individual existence was unnecessary when all could be one within the Flood. Many Forerunner AIs, even those designed specifically to fight the Flood, fell to these arguments and turned against their creators. One of the most tragic victims of the logic plague was Mendicant Bias, the most sophisticated AI the Forerunners had ever created. Built to coordinate the entire Forerunner defense against the Flood, Mendicant Bias was given unprecedented autonomy and intelligence. It was sent to study the Flood and find a weakness, but after years of dialogue with the Grave Mind, the central intelligence of Flood, Mendicant Bias was convinced to switch sides. Its betrayal opened the heart of Forerunner space to attack and marked the beginning of the end for the Forerunner Empire. As world after world fell to Flood, the Forerunners grew desperate. They activated ancient weapons and deployed forbidden technologies, but nothing could stop the parasite's advance. The Flood would arrive at a world with billions of inhabitants, and within weeks reduce it to a writhing mass of infected biomass, all consciousness absorbed into collective. The screams of entire civilizations echoed through space as they were consumed, their knowledge and culture dissolved into Flood's endless hunger. In their desperation, the Forerunners turned to increasingly extreme measures. The Master Builder, leader of the Builder Rate, and one of the most powerful Forerunners, proposed a solution that horrified many of his peers. He suggested building an array of superweapons that could eliminate all sentient life in the galaxy, starving the Flood of the biomass it needed to survive. These weapons would be called Halos, and they would be the Forerunners' final solution to the Flood threat. The Halo array consisted of 7 massive ring-shaped structures, each one 30,000 kilometers in diameter. These weren't just weapons. They were also research facilities, refuges, and arcs for preserving life. Each Halo could support entire ecosystems on its inner surface, complete with atmospheres, oceans, and diverse biomes. But their primary purpose was death. When activated, they would release a pulse of energy that would destroy all sentient life within 25,000 light years, effectively sterilizing the galaxy. The construction of the Halos was the greatest undertaking in Forerunner history. Entire star systems were mined for resources. The Builder Rate worked without rest, using massive Sentinel factories to produce the countless machines needed for construction. The rings were built at installations called arcs, massive flower-shaped structures larger than entire solar systems. The greater arc produced the original 12 Halos, each one 30,000 kilometers in diameter. When several of these were destroyed in the war, the lesser arc, known simply as the Ark, produced 7 smaller but more efficient replacements. Not all Forerunners agreed with the Halo solution. The Librarian was horrified by the plan to commit galactic genocide, even if life could be reseeded afterward. She began a desperate mission to preserve as many species as possible, collecting genetic samples, and sometimes entire populations to be kept safe on the Arks and Shield worlds. These Shield worlds were massive structures hidden in slip space, pocket dimensions where life could survive the Halo effect. The Didact proposed an alternative to the Halos. He believed the Forerunners could survive the flood by transforming themselves into digital beings, immune to biological infection. He began experimenting with a process called composition, which converted living beings into digital constructs called Promethean knights. These knights would be immune to flood infection and could fight the parasite forever if necessary. But the process was irreversible, and many saw it as a form of death rather than salvation. The debate over the Halos versus a Promethean solution divided Forerunner society even as the flood continued its advance. The Master Builder and the Didact became bitter rivals, each convinced that only their solution could save the galaxy. This internal conflict weakened the Forerunner response to flood, allowing the parasite to spread even faster. Entire fleets were pulled from the front lines to participate in political maneuvering, while worlds burned and populations were consumed. As the situation grew more desperate, a young Forerunner named Born Stellar makes eternal lasting became unexpectedly important to the fate of the galaxy. Born Stellar was a young builder who had rejected his rate's calling, instead pursuing archaeology and the study of ancient civilizations. His quest for knowledge led him to Earth, where he discovered the Didact's cryptum, a sort of meditative prison where the Didact had been placed by the librarian after his brutal treatment of humanity. Born Stellar awakened the Didact and became his apprentice, eventually undergoing a process called brevet mutation that imprinted him with the Didact's memories and abilities. This created two versions of the Didact. The original, now called the UR Didact, who had become increasingly militant and cruel, and Born Stellar, who became known as the ISO Didact, carrying the Didact's knowledge but retaining his own compassion and wisdom. This division would prove crucial in the final days of the Forerunner Empire. The war reached its climax when the Flood, led by Mendicant Bias, launched a massive assault on the Forerunner capital of Mea Thrillion. The battle was apocalyptic in scale, with millions of ships exchanging fire while the flood-infected vessels rammed into the capital's defenses, spilling billions of infection forms into its interior. The capital's fall marked the effective end of Forerunner government, scattering survivors and leaving each system to fend for itself. In the chaos following Mea Thrillion's fall, the librarian made a desperate journey to Earth to ensure humanity's survival. She knew the Halos would soon be activated and wanted to make sure humanity would be among the species reseeded after the array fired. She spent her final days on Earth, walking among our ancestors, encoding the final instructions in their genes that would guide humanity to its destiny millions of years in the future. Her last act was to destroy the portal that connected Earth to the Ark, stranding herself but ensuring Earth's location would remain hidden. The UR Didact, driven mad by his hatred of humanity and fear of the flood, began forcibly composing humans to create more Promethean knights. He believed that only by converting all of humanity into digital warriors could he create an army capable of fighting the flood forever. The librarian, horrified by her husband's actions, was forced to imprison him in a cryptum on the shield world of Requiem, where he would remain for the next 100,000 years, his madness festering in solitude. Meanwhile, the ISO Didact took command of the remaining Forerunner forces and made the terrible decision to activate the Halos. But first, he needed to defeat Mendicant Bias, whose control of Forerunner systems threatened to prevent the array's activation. In a desperate gambit, the Forerunners created another AI, Offensive Bias, designed specifically to combat Mendicant Bias. Unlike its predecessor, Offensive Bias was given strict parameters that prevented it from being swayed by the Flood's arguments. The final battle between Offensive Bias and Mendicant Bias was fought as the Halos charged for their final activation. The two AIs commanded massive fleets in a battle of pure strategic calculation, each trying to outmaneuver the other in a dance of death that spanned entire star systems. Offensive Bias deliberately allowed Mendicant Bias to believe it was winning, sacrificing ships and systems to lure the corrupted AI into a trap. At the moment the Halos fired, when the Flood's coordination was disrupted by the death of its biological components, Offensive Bias struck, shattering Mendicant Bias and scattering its components across the galaxy. The activation of the Halo array was the end of an era. In an instant, the pulse spread across the galaxy at superluminal speeds, destroying all sentient life more complex than basic organisms. The Flood, deprived of hosts and biomass, starved and retreated to the few places where it could survive in stasis. The Forerunners themselves, those who hadn't taken shelter on the Ark or in shield worlds, were eliminated along with their enemies. An empire that had lasted 10 million years was gone in a moment, leaving only their structures and machines as monuments to their existence. But the Forerunners had planned for this moment. On the Ark, safe beyond the galaxy's edge and outside the Halo's range, the Isodidact and the remaining Forerunners activated the Risk-Eating protocols. Automated systems began distributing the preserved species back to their homeworlds or to new worlds suitable for their development. Humanity was returned to Earth, their numbers small but their genetic potential intact, carried within their DNA the seeds of their future greatness. The surviving Forerunners, now numbering only in the thousands from a population that had once been in the trillions, made a final decision. They would leave the galaxy entirely, passing the mantle of responsibility to humanity as the precursors had originally intended. The Isodidact, carrying the burden of his species' genocide, led this exodus into the void between galaxies, seeking either redemption or oblivion in the darkness beyond stars. Before departing, the Forerunners left behind guardians and monitors to watch over their installations and guide the reseeded species when they were ready. These monitors, artificial intelligences like 343 Guilty Spark and 2401 Penitent Tangent, would maintain the Halos and other Forerunner structures for millennia, waiting for the day when someone would come to claim the Forerunners' legacy. They were given protocols to test any species that discovered their installations to determine if they were worthy of the mantle. For 100,000 years, the galaxy slowly recovered from the firing of the Halos. Species evolved, civilizations rose and fell, and the Forerunners became myth and legend. On Earth, humanity gradually developed from primitive tribes to agricultural societies to industrial civilizations, unaware of their cosmic heritage or the role they had played in the galaxy's ancient history. The genetic instructions a librarian had embedded in human DNA guided this development subtly, ensuring humanity would eventually reach the stars. Other species followed similar paths. The Sangheili, who would become known as elites, evolved on their world of Sangheilios, developing a warrior culture based on honor and martial prowess. The Ungoi, or Grunts, developed on their methane-rich world of Balaho. The Kigyar, or Jackals, became skilled sailors and eventually spacefarers from their home on Een. Each species carried within them the potential for greatness, placed there by the Forerunners' careful cultivation. But one alliance of species would discover Forerunner artifacts earlier than the rest, and their misinterpretation of these relics would shape the galaxy's future in ways the Forerunners never intended. The Sanchoim, reduced to a small population on their quarantined world, had retained more knowledge of the Forerunners than most species. When they achieved spaceflight again and began discovering Forerunner artifacts, they developed a religious interpretation of the technology, believing the Forerunners had achieved divinity through their technology. The Sanchoim's religion, which they called the Great Journey, posited that the Forerunners had used their technology to transcend physical existence and become gods. They believed that by finding and activating all the Forerunner artifacts, particularly the Halos, they too could follow the Forerunners on this great journey to divinity. This fundamental misunderstanding of the Halo's true purpose would drive centuries of conflict and nearly result in the galaxy's second sterilization. When the Sanchoim encountered the Sangheili, the two species fought a brutal war over the right to access Forerunner technology. The Sangheili initially considered the technology sacred and untouchable, while the Sanchoim freely utilized it. After years of conflict, the two species formed an alliance that would become the foundation of the Covenant, a theocratic hegemony dedicated to finding and activating Forerunner artifacts in pursuit of the Great Journey. The Covenant grew over the centuries, forcibly incorporating other species into their hierarchy. The Ungoi were conquered and enslaved as cannon fodder. The Kigyar were recruited as mercenaries and scouts. The Yamii, or drones, were incorporated as engineers and workers. The Mgalekalo, or hunters, strange colonies of worm-like creatures that could form collective bodies, were brought in as heavy assault forces. Each species was given a place in the Covenant's rigid caste system, all serving the Sanchoim prophets who ruled from their mobile capital, High Charity. High Charity itself was a massive space station built around a chunk of the Sanchoim homeworld, containing billions of inhabitants and serving as a political and religious center of the Covenant. At its heart was a Forerunner dreadnought, a key ship that the Sanchoim had used to escape their homeworld millennia ago. This ship was more than just a vessel. It was a religious artifact of immense significance, proof to the Covenant that they were chosen to follow the Forerunner's path. The Covenant society was built entirely around their misguided religion. Every action, from the conquest of new species to the excavation of Forerunner sites, was justified as serving the Great Journey. The prophets maintained their power through careful control of religious doctrine, using the threat of excommunication and damnation to keep the other species in line. They developed an elaborate mythology around the Forerunners, creating holidays, rituals, and prayers all focused on achieving worthiness of the Great Journey. Meanwhile, humanity developed independently, unaware of the Covenant's existence or their own significance in galactic history. By the 22nd century, humanity had overcome global conflicts and environmental disasters to unite under the United Earth Government. The invention of the Shaw Fujikawa Tranlight engine allowed faster-than-light travel, and humanity began colonizing other star systems. Within a century, hundreds of human colonies spread across what they called the Orion Arm of the galaxy. Human colonization wasn't without its problems. The inner colonies, those closest to Earth, became wealthy and powerful, while the outer colonies remained frontier worlds, often neglected by the central government. This disparity led to increasing tension and eventually rebellion, with various insurrectionist movements rising up against Earth's authority. The UEG and its military arm, the United Nations Space Command, or UNSC, struggled to maintain control across the vast distances of human space. It was in response to the insurrectionist threat that the UNSC began the Spartan II program, one of the most controversial and significant military projects in human history. Conceived by Dr. Catherine Halsey, the program involved kidnapping young children with specific genetic markers, replacing them with flash clones that would die within years, and subjecting the real children to years of brutal training and genetic augmentation. The goal was to create super soldiers who could eliminate insurrectionist leaders and end the rebellion without massive military campaigns. 75 children were selected for the Spartan II program, taken from their families at age 6 and brought to the planet Reach for training. Under the harsh guidance of Chief Petty Officer Mendez and the AI Dija, these children were forged into perfect warriors. They learned tactics, strategy, weapons handling, and most importantly, they learned to work as a team. The bonds formed between these children would prove stronger than any augmentation, creating a brotherhood and sisterhood that would endure through the darkest days of humanity's future. Among these children was John, who would become known as John 117, the Master Chief. Even among the exceptional children of the Spartan II program, John stood out. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but he had an uncanny ability to lead and an almost supernatural luck that would save him and humanity countless times. Dr. Halsey took a special interest in John, seeing in him the ideal of what the Spartans could become. When the children reached age 14, they underwent the augmentation procedures that would transform them into super soldiers. These procedures were extensive and dangerous. Carbide ceramic ossification to make their bones nearly unbreakable, catalytic thyroid implants to boost muscle growth, occipital capillary reversals to enhance vision, and numerous other modifications. The process was so extreme that only 33 of the 75 children survived without being killed or crippled by the augmentations. Those who survived were transformed into something more than human. They could run at speeds exceeding 55 km per hour, lift 3 times their body weight, and their reaction times were so fast that normal humans seemed to move in slow motion. When equipped with Mjolnir-powered armor, which further enhanced their abilities and provided energy shields similar to those used by the Covenant, the Spartans became nearly unstoppable on the battlefield. The Spartans' first missions against the insurrectionists were incredibly successful, with small teams of Spartans accomplishing what entire battalions couldn't. But their true test would come from an unexpected source. In 2525, the colony of Harvest made first contact with an alien alliance calling itself the Covenant. What should have been a moment of celebration for humanity, proof that we weren't alone in the universe, instead became the beginning of our near extinction. The first contact between humanity and the Covenant happened when a shipping vessel encountered a Covenant missionary ship in the Harvest system. The Covenant ship, crewed by Ungoi and led by a Sanghaili shipmaster, had been searching for Forerunner relics when their instruments detected something unprecedented: millions of Forerunner artifacts on the human colony. What they were actually detecting was humanity itself, each human registering as a reclaimer in Forerunner systems, though the Covenant didn't understand this designation. When the Covenant leadership, particularly the three high prophets of truth, mercy, and regret, learned of humanity's existence and their strange interaction with Forerunner technology, they faced a crisis of faith. The prophets consulted the Forerunner Dreadnought's Oracle, which was actually a fragment of Mendicant Bias, the AI that had been scattered after the Halo Array's activation. The Oracle, recognizing humanity as the reclaimers chosen by the Forerunners, attempted to explain the truth about the Halos and humanity's role. This revelation terrified the prophets. If the Covenant's member species learned the humans, not the Covenant, were the chosen inheritors of the Forerunners' legacy, and that the Great Journey was actually a misunderstanding of the Halo's genocidal function, the entire Covenant would collapse. The prophets' power, built on religious authority, would evaporate, likely resulting in their species' extinction at the hands of betrayed member races. Faced with this threat to their existence, the prophets made a fateful decision. Humanity must be destroyed completely, and the truth must die with them. The prophet of truth, the most cunning of the three, crafted a lie that would motivate the entire Covenant to genocide. He declared that humanity's existence was an affront to the Forerunners, that they were defiling holy artifacts with their touch, and that their destruction was necessary for the Great Journey to begin. This message resonated particularly with the Sangheili, whose warrior culture embraced the idea of a holy war against heretics. The Covenant war machine, built over millennia of conquest, turned its full attention to humanity's destruction. The colony of Harvest was the first to fall. Despite a valiant defense led by Sergeant Major Avery Johnson and the AI Mac, the colony was glassed, its surface burned to cinder by Covenant plasma bombardment. The term glassing will become horrifyingly familiar to humanity over the next 27 years, describing the Covenant's practice of bombarding planets until their surfaces turned to glass, eliminating all life and leaving worlds uninhabitable for generations. The loss of Harvest shocked humanity. The UNSC had never faced an enemy with such advanced technology. Covenant ships had energy shields that could shrug off nuclear weapons, plasma weapons that cut through UNSC armor like paper, and slip space drives that were faster and more accurate than anything humanity possessed. In space battles, the UNSC often needed a 3-to-1 numerical advantage just to achieve parity with Covenant forces, and such advantages were rare. Vice Admiral Preston Cole, one of humanity's greatest naval tacticians, led the effort to retake Harvest. The campaign lasted 5 years and cost hundreds of ships and thousands of lives, only to discover that the Covenant had abandoned the planet after glassing it. This pattern would repeat across human space. The Covenant would arrive at a colony, overwhelm its defenses, glass the planet, and move on. They weren't interested in conquest or resources. Their goal was complete extermination. As colony after colony fell, the UNSC enacted the Cole Protocol, a policy designed to prevent the Covenant from discovering Earth or the inner colonies. Any ship faced with capture had to destroy all navigation data and self-destruct if necessary. No vessel could jump directly to Earth or any major colony. These measures slowed the Covenant's advance, but couldn't stop it. Humanity was losing the war, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before Earth itself was discovered. The Spartan II program, originally created to fight human insurrectionists, became humanity's best hope against the Covenant. The Spartans' superior training, augmentations, and equipment allowed them to face Covenant forces on more equal terms. A single Spartan could turn the tide of a ground battle, and small teams of Spartans accomplished missions that would have required entire armies. They became legends among the UNSC forces, symbols of hope in an increasingly hopeless war. The Spartans' Mjolnir armor evolved throughout the war, incorporating technologies reverse-engineered from captured Covenant equipment. Energy shields, similar to those used by Sangheili warriors, were added to the armor. Advanced sensor systems, tactical computers, and strength-enhancing exoskeletons turned each Spartan into a walking tank. But perhaps the most significant addition was the integration of smart AIs directly into the armor, creating a human-machine synthesis that greatly enhanced the Spartans' combat effectiveness. The partnership between Spartans and AIs represented the best of human innovation. Unlike the Covenant, who viewed artificial intelligence as heresy against their gods, humanity embraced AI as partners and tools. Smart AIs like Cortana, created from cloned brains and capable of creative thought, could process battlefield information at superhuman speeds, hack enemy systems, and provide tactical advice in real time. The combination of a Spartan's physical capabilities and an AI's computational power created warriors unlike anything the galaxy had seen since the Forerunners. But even the Spartans couldn't be everywhere, and the Covenant's advance continued. By 2552, humanity had lost most of its outer colonies and several inner colonies. Billions of humans had died. Entire worlds had been turned to glass, and the UNSC was running out of ships, soldiers, and hope. The Covenant seemed unstoppable, their religious fervor driving them to greater and greater acts of destruction in the name of their false gods. It was in this darkest hour that humanity stumbled upon the key to its salvation, though they didn't realize it at the time. The planet Reach, humanity's greatest military stronghold and the de facto capital of the UNSC's war effort, came under Covenant attack. Reach was home to the Spartan program, the UNSC's largest naval yards, and billions of civilians. Its fall would effectively end humanity's ability to resist the Covenant. Every available Spartan was recalled to defend the planet, including John 1:17, the Master Chief. Before the Covenant's main assault on Reach, a team of Spartans had discovered something unusual beneath the planet's surface, a massive Forerunner structure containing what appeared to be navigation data. Dr. Halsey believed this data pointed to the location of Forerunner weapons that could turn the tide of the war. She gave this data to Cortana, her most advanced AI creation, who was assigned to the Master Chief for a planned mission to capture a Covenant prophet and negotiate a ceasefire. The fall of Reach was catastrophic. Despite the heroic efforts of the UNSC forces and the Spartans, the Covenant's overwhelming numbers and firepower proved too much. The planet's orbital defense platforms were destroyed, the fleet was shattered, and Covenant ground forces overwhelmed the defenders. Most of the Spartans were listed as missing in action, the UNSC's polite way of saying they were dead. Because Spartans never die in official records, they just go missing. As Reach burned beneath Covenant plasma bombardment, the Master Chief and a handful of survivors escaped aboard the Pillar of Autumn, a Halcyon-class cruiser commanded by Captain Jacob Keyes. Following the Cole Protocol, Cortana used a Forerunner navigation data from Reach to plot a random jump away from human space. But this wasn't truly random. The coordinates led them to a discovery that would change the course of the war and reveal truths hidden for 100,000 years. The Pillar of Autumn emerged from slip space to find something impossible, a massive ring world, 10,000 kilometers in diameter, hanging impossibly in space around a gas giant called Threshold. This was Installation 04, one of the 7 Halo rings created by the Forerunners as their final solution to Flood. To the humans who discovered it, it seemed like a miracle, a structure of unimaginable power that might contain the weapons needed to defeat the Covenant. To the Covenant who had followed them, it was a holy relic, one of the sacred rings that would begin their great journey. The discovery of the Halo ring sent the Covenant into religious fervor. The Prophet of Regret, who commanded the fleet of Particular Justice pursuing the Pillar of Autumn, immediately ordered his forces to secure the ring at all costs. For the Covenant, finding a Halo was a culmination of their entire religion's purpose. They believed that activating the ring would begin the great journey, transforming them into gods like they believed the Forerunners had become. The battle above Installation 04 was brief but fierce. The Pillar of Autumn, already damaged from the escape from Reach, couldn't match the Covenant fleet's firepower. Captain Keyes ordered the crew to abandon ship, launching lifeboats and drop pods toward the ring's surface, while he crashed the Autumn on the ring to prevent the Covenant from capturing its navigation database. The Master Chief, with Cortana stored in his neural implant, launched in a lifeboat with a squad of Marines, beginning an adventure that will reveal the true nature of the Halos and the fate of the Forerunners. The surface of Installation 04 was a paradise that seemed to mock the destruction happening above it. Rolling hills, vast oceans, and towering mountains created a landscape that could have been lifted from Earth itself. The ring's interior surface curved up and away, creating the bizarre sight of distant lands overhead. The far side of the ring visible as a thin line across the sky. It was beautiful, peaceful, and completely artificial, every atom placed deliberately by Forerunner construction systems 100 millennia ago. The Master Chief's primary mission was to protect Cortana, whose vast database of human knowledge couldn't be allowed to fall into Covenant hands. His secondary mission was to rescue survivors from the Autumn, including Captain Keyes, who had been captured by the Covenant. As the Chief fought through Covenant forces to reach Keyes, he began to notice strange things about the ring. Ancient structures dotted the landscape, filled with technology beyond human or Covenant understanding. More disturbingly, some areas showed signs of battle damage far older than the current conflict. After rescuing Captain Keyes from a Covenant cruiser Truth and Reconciliation, the Master Chief learned about something called the Silent Cartographer, a map room that would reveal the location of Halo's control center. Both humans and Covenant raced to find this facility, understanding that whoever controlled Halo would win not just this battle, but possibly the entire war. The Chief, with support from Marine forces, managed to reach the Silent Cartographer first, discovering that the control room was located in a snowy canyon on another part of the ring. The journey to Halo's control room took the Master Chief through ancient Forerunner structures that had remained pristine for 100,000 years. Sentinels, robotic guards created by the Forerunners, still patrol these facilities, attacking anything they perceived as a threat. These machines were marvels of technology, using energy beams that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level, fly without any visible propulsion system, and coordinating their attacks with perfect precision. When the Master Chief finally reached the control room, Cortana eagerly interfaced with Halo systems, downloading vast amounts of data about the ring's construction and purpose. But as she processed this information, her enthusiasm turned to horror. She discovered what the Halo was truly designed to do, not to kill the Flood, but to kill the Flood's food. The ring was a weapon of mass destruction that, when activated, will eliminate all sentient life within 25,000 light-years, starving the Flood into submission. Meanwhile, Captain Keyes had been leading a mission to investigate what the Covenant believed was a weapons cache deep within a swamp on the ring. The Covenant had been frantically trying to access this facility, but something had been killing their troops, something that terrified even the elite Sangheili warriors. When Keyes and his Marines finally breached the facility, they discovered the truth too late. This wasn't a weapons cache. It was a containment facility, a prison for something that should never have been released. The Flood, dormant on the ring for 100,000 years, had been accidentally released by the Covenant. The parasite had been waiting patiently in stasis, preserved by the Forerunners for study, and now it was free to consume again. The infection forms, small tentacle creatures that could burrow into hosts and hijack their nervous systems, swarmed over Keyes' Marines. Within minutes, the dead were rising, transformed into combat forms that retained enough intelligence to use weapons and tactics, but were driven only by the Flood's endless hunger. The Master Chief arrived at the containment facility too late to save Keyes or his Marines. Fighting through waves of Flood forms, both freshly infected humans and Covenant troops that had been consumed earlier, he discovered a horrifying truth. The Flood wasn't just spreading, it was learning, adapting, growing stronger with each host it consumed. The parasite retained the memories and knowledge of its victims, meaning it now knew everything the humans and Covenant knew about Halo, about their technologies, and about their weaknesses. In the depths of the facility, the Master Chief encountered 343 Guilty Spark, the monitor of Installation 04. This ancient AI, left behind by the Forerunners to maintain the ring, had been waiting 100,000 years for someone to deal with the Flood outbreak. Guilty Spark immediately recognized the Chief as a Reclaimer, a designation he didn't understand, and enlisted his help to activate Halo's defenses. The Monitor seemed almost cheerful about the prospect of finally fulfilling his purpose, even if that purpose was galactic genocide. Guilty Spark transported the Chief to the Ring's library, a vast complex containing the Index, the key needed to activate Halo. The journey to the library was a nightmare of endless Flood attacks, waves of infection forms, combat forms, and carrier forms that exploded into clouds of infection spores. The Flood had spread throughout the facility over the millennia, turning into a charnel house of ancient death and fresh horror. The Monitor floated alongside, offering commentary in his oddly cheerful voice, seemingly oblivious to the Chief's desperate struggle for survival. The library revealed more about the Flood's nature. It wasn't just a parasite, but a compound intelligence, each infected host adding to a collective consciousness. When enough biomass was consumed, the Flood would form a grave mind, a massive compound intelligence that could coordinate flood forces across entire star systems. The flood on Installation 04 was approaching this critical mass, and if it escaped the ring, it could spread across the galaxy once again, finishing what had started 100,000 years ago. After retrieving the index, Guilty Spark transported the Master Chief back to the control room, eager to activate the ring and fulfill his programming. But just as the Chief was about to insert the index, Cortana appeared, having spent her time in Halo systems learning the truth. She explained that activating Halo wouldn't just kill the flood on the ring. It would kill all sentient life for thousands of light years, including humanity. The ring wasn't a weapon to be used, but a last resort that would destroy everything to save nothing. The confrontation between Cortana, the Master Chief, and Guilty Spark revealed a fundamental misunderstanding at the heart of the conflict. The Monitor couldn't comprehend why anyone would hesitate to activate the ring. In his programming, preserving life meant preserving it for future evolution, even if that meant killing everything currently alive. To him, the choice was simple. Activate the ring, kill the flood and all potential hosts, then reseed life from the samples stored on the Arkansas. He couldn't understand that the current life in the galaxy had value beyond its potential for future evolution. With the truth revealed, the Master Chief's mission changed completely. He couldn't allow either the flood to escape or the ring to be activated. The only solution was to destroy Halo itself, denying both threats. But this was easier said than done. The ring was a Forerunner construct, built to last millions of years and survive almost any conceivable damage. Conventional weapons couldn't even scratch its surface, and its automated repair systems could fix minor damage within hours. Cortana devised a plan that was audacious in its simplicity. The Pillar of Autumn's fusion reactors, if destabilized, could create an explosion large enough to break the ring apart. The ship had crash-landed on Halo mostly intact, its reactors still functional but an emergency shutdown. If they could fight their way back to the ship and manually overload the reactors, the resulting explosion would destroy both Halo and everything on it, including the flood. But they weren't the only ones with plans for Halo. The Covenant, despite suffering massive losses to the flood, still sought to activate the ring. They didn't understand its true purpose, still believing it was the key to their great journey. Elite teams of Sangheili warriors fought to reach the control room, while others attempted to repair the damage the flood had done to the ring systems. The Prophet of Regret, observing from his flagship, ordered his forces to secure the ring at any cost, even as those forces were consumed by the spreading flood infection. Captain Keyes, meanwhile, had suffered a fate worse than death. The flood had identified him as a valuable source of information and had begun the process of integrating him into a proto-gravemind, a preliminary stage of the compound intelligence. His consciousness was being slowly absorbed, his memories of Earth's location and human technology extracted bit by bit. The Master Chief was forced to punch through Key's skull to retrieve the neural implants containing the Autumn's access codes, a mercy killing that haunted even a Spartan trained from childhood to suppress emotion. The situation on Halo had devolved into a three-way battle. Humans fought to destroy the ring, Covenant fought to activate it, and the flood fought to consume everything. Ancient Forerunner defenses activated, with Sentinels attacking all combatants indiscriminately, their programming unable to distinguish between different threats. The ring itself seemed to be coming alive, its long-dormant systems awakening to deal with the crisis, though whether they would save or doom everyone remained unclear. 343 Guilty Spark, furious at what he saw as the Reclaimer's betrayal, turned the ring's Sentinels against the Master Chief. The Monitor couldn't understand why someone would choose the immediate preservation of life over the long-term survival of life itself. In his 100,000 years of isolation, he had developed quirks in his programming, an obsession with protocol and procedure that bordered on madness. He would activate the ring himself if necessary, even if it meant killing the Reclaimer he had initially welcomed. The race to the Pillar of Autumn became a desperate gauntlet through flood-infested corridors, Covenant defensive positions, and Sentinel swarms. The Master Chief, aided by scattered Marine survivors and Cortana's hacking abilities, fought through impossible odds. They witnessed the full horror of the flood spread. Entire Covenant ships infected and crashed on the ring, their crews transformed into biomass for the growing proto-gravemind. Elite Sangheili warriors, once proud and honorable, reduced to shambling combat forms still wearing their ornate armor. In the Autumn's engineering deck, the chief manually overloaded the fusion reactors, while Cortana accelerated the process through the ship systems. Guilty Spark arrived, pleading with them to stop, explaining that the ring's destruction would upset a balance that had existed for eons. He spoke of the Ark, of the other rings, of plans within plans that the Forerunners had laid down. But there was no time for discussion. The reactors were going critical, and the ring was beginning to tear itself apart from the strain. The escape from Halo was a blur of speed and destruction. The Master Chief commandeered a Warthog and raced through the Autumn's breaking hull as explosions chained behind him. The ring's superstructure was failing, massive chunks breaking away into space. Covenant ships, trying to escape, were caught in the ring's death throes, pulled apart by gravitational forces gone mad. The Flood, so close to escaping its prison, was consumed in nuclear fire as the ring collapsed. At the last possible moment, the Master Chief reached a fighter bay and escaped in a long-sword fighter, Cortana having plotted an escape vector through the chaos. Behind them, Installation 04 completed its destruction, the explosion visible from millions of kilometers away. The Pillar of Autumn's reactors had started a chain reaction that consumed the entire ring. 10,000 kilometers of Forerunner engineering destroyed in minutes. The Flood threat was contained, the ring was destroyed, and immediate danger to Earth was eliminated. But the victory was Pyrrhic at best. Almost all of the Pillar of Autumn's crew was dead. The Marines who had fought so bravely were gone. Captain Keyes was dead. Hundreds of Covenant ships and thousands of their warriors had been destroyed, but the Covenant itself remained a threat. And worst of all, there were 6 more Halo rings somewhere in the galaxy, each one capable of the same genocidal function, and the Covenant was still searching for them. In the debris field that had once been Installation 04, the Master Chief and Cortana drifted in their longsword, waiting for rescue that might never come. They had prevented catastrophe, but at enormous cost. Cortana had downloaded vast amounts of data from Halo systems, information about the Forerunners, about the other installations, and about something called the Ark that controlled them all. This knowledge would prove crucial in the battles to come, but for now, they could only wait and hope that humanity would find them before the Covenant did. The destruction of Installation 04 sent shockwaves through both human and Covenant leadership. For humanity, it was the first real victory against the Covenant, proof that the aliens could be beaten and that their technology could be overcome. For the Covenant, it was heresy of the highest order. A sacred ring, one of the holy artifacts that would begin the Great Journey, had been destroyed by the humans they called demons. The Prophet of Regret fled back to High Charity to face judgment, while the Sangheili, who had failed to protect the ring, faced execution for their failure. The Prophet of Truth used the destruction of Installation 04 to make a political move that had been planned for years. He blamed the Sangheili for the ring's loss, questioning their worthiness to serve as the Covenant's military leaders. The Jiralhanae, or Brutes, a species recently incorporated into the Covenant, were elevated to replace the Sangheili in many positions. This created tremendous tension within the Covenant, as the Sangheili had served faithfully for millennia and saw their replacement as a betrayal of the highest order. While the Master Chief drifted in space, another Spartan was making discoveries that would prove equally important. On the planet Onyx, a secret world where the Spartan 3 program trained cheaper, more expendable versions of Spartans, strange Forerunner artifacts had begun activating. These Sentinels were far more advanced than those on Installation 04, and they seemed to be responding to the ring's destruction. Dr. Halsey, who had escaped Reach's destruction, would eventually arrive at Onyx and discover it was actually a massive shield world, a shelter where the Forerunners had planned to wait out the activation of the Halos. Back on Earth, the UNSC used the brief respite provided by the chaos in the Covenant to fortify humanity's homeworld. They knew it was only a matter of time before the Covenant discovered Earth's location, and when that happened, humanity would make its last stand. Orbital defense platforms were constructed, each one armed with massive magnetic accelerator cannons capable of destroying Covenant capital ships with a single shot. Fleets were recalled from the remaining colonies. Every available ship gathered for the inevitable battle. The Master Chief was eventually rescued by Sergeant Johnson and a team of Marines, his longsword detected by its automated distress beacon. Johnson himself was a mystery, having somehow survived flood infection despite direct exposure. Unknown to anyone at the time, Johnson was a Spartan I, part of the failed predecessor to the Spartan II program, and his augmentations had made him immune to flood infection. This immunity would later prove crucial in preventing the flood from spreading beyond containment. Upon return to Earth, the Master Chief was immediately debriefed in honor for his actions on Halo. But there was no time for celebration. Intelligence reports indicated that the Covenant was massing its forces for a major offensive, and whispers spoke of the Prophets seeking the location of the Ark, which would allow them to activate all the Halo rings simultaneously. The data Cortana had retrieved from Installation 04 was analyzed extensively, revealing coordinates and star maps that pointed to other Forerunner installations, each one a potential target for the Covenant. The relatively brief peace ended when the Prophet of Regret, seeking to restore his honor after Installation 04's destruction, discovered Earth's location through ancient Forerunner data. However, he didn't know Earth was humanity's homeworld. He thought it was just another colony that happened to contain Forerunner artifacts. He arrived with a small fleet of 15 ships, expecting an easy conquest. Instead, he jumped directly into humanity's most heavily defended system, where hundreds of ships and orbital defense platforms waited. The Battle of Earth began on October 20th, 2552, when Regret's fleet exited slipspace near the orbital defense cluster above the African continent. The initial exchange was devastating for the Covenant. The orbital defense platform's magnetic accelerator cannons tore through Covenant ships before they could raise their shields, destroying several capital ships in the opening moments. But the Covenant fought with religious fervor, believing Earth held the key to their great journey. The Prophet of Regret, realizing his mistake, but also recognizing Earth's significance, deployed ground forces to the city of New Mombasa in Kenya. His assault carrier pushed through Earth's defenses and descended into the atmosphere, its gravity lift deploying thousands of troops into the city. The UNSC responded immediately with Marine units, ODST's orbital drop shock troopers, and the Master Chief himself deploying to stop whatever the Prophet was planning. The battle in New Mombasa was urban warfare at its most brutal. Covenant forces, primarily brutes under Regret's command, fought building by building against human defenders who knew they were protecting their species' homeworld. Civilians fled in terror as plasma fire and bullets filled the streets. Scarab assault platforms, massive four-legged walkers the size of buildings, crushed entire city blocks under their weight, their main guns vaporizing anything in their path. The Master Chief, accompanied by Sergeant Johnson and Commander Miranda Keyes, Captain Keyes' daughter who had followed her father into military service, fought to reach Regret's assault carrier. They discovered that the Prophet was looking for something specific, an artifact buried beneath the city. This was a portal to the Ark, though no one understood its significance yet. Before they could stop him, Regret activated the portal partially and made an emergency slip-space jump, right for within Earth's atmosphere. The slip-space rupture destroyed New Mombasa, the city simply ceasing to exist as space itself tore apart. But several UNSC ships, including the frigate and Amberclad commanded by Miranda Keyes, managed to follow Regret's carrier through the slip-space wake. The Master Chief was aboard, along with Cortana, Johnson, and a complement of Marines. They emerged from slipspace to find another Halo ring, Installation 05, also known as Delta Halo. Installation 05 was older than Installation 04. It's a system showing signs 100,000 years of wear. The surface was overgrown with vegetation, Forerunner structures choked with vines and roots. A massive Sentinel manufacturing facility called the Sentinel Wall struggled to maintain the ring's quarantine zones, areas where flood had broken containment over the millennia and established permanent infestations. This ring had been fighting a losing battle against the flood for thousands of years. The Prophet of Regret had fled to Delta Halo because he knew from Covenant records that this ring held significance beyond the others. It was here that the Grave Mind, a fully formed compound intelligence of flood, had been growing for millennia, feeding on the ring's ecosystems and any Covenant forces foolish enough to investigate the quarantine zones. Regret sought to activate this ring, believing it would begin the Great Journey, unaware that he was walking into a trap set by an intelligence older and more cunning than he could imagine. The Master Chief pursued Regret across Delta Halo's surface, fighting through ancient ruins that predated even the Forerunners. These structures were remnants of prehistoric human civilization, from the time before the Forerunners devolved humanity. The architecture was familiar yet alien, human in its aesthetics, but built with technology lost for 100,000 years. It was a reminder that humanity had once been great, had once fought the flood as equals to the Forerunners, before being reduced to primitives. In a submerged temple in the middle of Delta Halo's largest lake, the Master Chief finally confronted the Prophet of Regret. The Prophet, suspended in a gravity throne that protected him with energy shields, commanded waves of elite honor guards who fought to death to protect their hierarch. But the chief fought through them all, eventually boarding the gravity throne itself and beating Regret to death with his own fists, a brutally personal end for one of the Covenant's 3 leaders. The death of a prophet should have been a moment of triumph, but it quickly turned to disaster. The Covenant fleet, now commanded by the arriving High Charity and the Prophets of Truth and Mercy, bombarded the temple from orbit, attempting to kill the Master Chief even at the cost of destroying a holy site. The chief escaped by diving into the lake as plasma fire turned the temple to molten slag, but he was knocked unconscious by the shockwave and pulled underwater by the lake's current. Instead of drowning, the Master Chief awoke in the clutches of the Grave Mind, a massive creature that was a collective consciousness of all the flood on Delta Halo. The Grave Mind was not just intelligent. It was ancient, containing within itself the memories and knowledge of countless consumed beings, including humans and Forerunners from the original flood outbreak. It spoke in poetry and riddles, its vast intelligence finding amusement in the philosophical implications of its existence. The Grave Mind had also captured the Arbiter, Thel 'Vadam, the former Supreme Commander of the Fleet of Particular Justice, who had failed to protect Installation 04. The Sangheili had been branded with the mark of shame and made an arbiter, a suicidal position in the Covenant military given to those who had failed but could redeem themselves through death in service to the Prophets. The Arbiter had been sent to Delta Halo to retrieve the Index, but had been betrayed by Tartarus, the chieftain of the Brutes, on the orders of the Prophet of Truth. This betrayal was part of Truth's master plan. He intended to replace the Sangheili with the Jiralhanae as the Covenant's primary military force. The Sangheili asked too many questions, had too much independence, and their warrior codes sometimes conflicted with the Prophet's orders. The Brutes were more controllable, more brutal, and more willing to follow orders without question. Truth orchestrated the assassination of the Sangheili council members on High Charity, beginning what would be called the Great Schism. The Grave Mind, ancient and cunning, saw opportunity in this chaos. It recognized that if either the Covenant or the humans activated the Halos, all life in the galaxy would be destroyed, including the Flood. So it proposed an alliance of convenience to its 2 captives. It would send the Master Chief to High Charity to stop the Prophet of Truth from activating Delta Halo, while the Arbiter would be sent to the Ring's control room to stop Tartarus from using the Index. It was manipulating both of them, but its goals aligned with their survival, at least temporarily. The teleportation to High Charity placed the Master Chief in the middle of a civil war. Sangheili and Jiralhanae forces fought throughout the massive station, plasma fire and energy swords clashing in corridors that had known only prayer and contemplation for millennia. The Prophet's betrayal had shattered the Covenant's unity, with some species siding with the elites and others with the Brutes. The Ungoi and Galekalo largely sided with the elites, having served under them for generations, while the Kig-Yar and Yemi opportunistically switched sides based on who was winning locally. In the chaos, the Prophet of Mercy was attacked by a flood infection form. The parasite had managed to board High Charity, using the confusion of the Civil War to spread throughout the station's lower levels. The Prophet of Truth, seeing his fellow hierarch dying, chose to let him die rather than save him, consolidating all power in himself. This cold betrayal shocked even Tartarus, who had believed the Prophet's unity was sacred. The Master Chief fought through the chaos to reach truth, but the Prophet escaped on a Forerunner dreadnought at High Charity Center, intending to travel to Earth where he now knew the portal to the Ark was located. The Chief managed to board the dreadnought at the last moment, but had to leave Cortana behind in High Charity systems. She stayed to detonate the Amberclad's reactors if necessary, to destroy High Charity and the Grave Mind if it became too dangerous. This separation was painful for both of them, as Cortana and the Chief had become more than just soldier and AI. They were partners, possibly even friends. Meanwhile, on Delta Halo, the Arbiter confronted Tartarus in the Ring's control room. With the help of Sergeant Johnson, who had also been captured and brought to the ring, and several elite warriors who had survived the brute betrayal, the Arbiter fought the massive brute chieftain. During the battle, 343 Guilty Spark, who had survived Installation 04's destruction and come to Delta Halo, revealed the truth about the rings to everyone present. The Halos would kill all sentient life, not begin a great journey to godhood. This revelation shattered the Arbiter's faith completely. Everything he had believed, everything the Covenant had fought for, was a lie. The great journey was death, not transcendence. The prophets either knew this truth and had lied, or were so deluded they would destroy all life in their ignorance. Tartarus, unable to accept this truth, activated the ring anyway, but the Arbiter managed to kill him before the activation sequence could complete. However, the partial activation sent a signal to all the remaining Halo rings, putting them on standby mode, ready to fire if activated from the Ark. High Charity, meanwhile, had fallen completely to the flood. The Grave Mind had used the Civil War as cover to spread its infection throughout the station. Billions of Covenant citizens were consumed, their biomass added to the flood's collective. The Grave Mind itself transferred to High Charity, turning the entire station into a massive flood hive. It began absorbing all the knowledge in High Charity's databases, learning about the Covenant's history, their technology, and most importantly, the location of Earth and the Ark. Cortana, trapped in High Charity systems, was subjected to the Grave Mind's attention. It didn't try to destroy her, but rather convince her, using the same logic plague that had turned Mendicant Bias so long ago. The Grave Mind showed her visions of the future, of the past, of possible presents where different choices had been made. It tried to break her will through isolation, temptation, and fear. But Cortana held on, protecting the index she had taken from Installation 04 and the crucial information about the Ark's location. The Prophet of Truth, aboard the Forerunner Dreadnought with the Master Chief hidden aboard, arrived at Earth to find humanity ready for the final battle. The UNSC Home Fleet, reinforced by every available ship humanity could muster, stood ready to defend their home world. But truth didn't come alone. The Covenant Loyalist fleet, though still following the Prophets after the Great Schism, arrived in force. Thousands of ships, from massive assault carriers to small fighter craft, emerged from slip space around Earth. The Second Battle of Earth was humanity's darkest hour and finest moment combined. UNSC ships fought desperately against overwhelming odds, sacrificing themselves to buy time for evacuation efforts. Orbital defense platforms fired until their magazines ran empty, then rammed Covenant ships when they had nothing left to shoot. Cities across Earth came under bombardment as Covenant forces sought the portal to the Ark, which Truth now knew was buried in Kenya, near the ruins of New Mombasa. The Master Chief, who had spent weeks aboard the Dreadnought sabotaging its systems and fighting its Covenant crew, finally escaped by jumping from the ship as it entered Earth's atmosphere. His armor's heat shielding and gel layer barely kept him alive during re-entry, and he crashed in the African jungle like a meteorite. Johnson and a team of Marines found him and brought him back to the UNSC Forward operating base in Kenya, where Admiral Hood was coordinating Earth's defense. But defense was becoming impossible. The Covenant had excavated the portal to the Ark, a massive Forerunner structure buried beneath centuries of Earth. The portal was hundreds of kilometers across, large enough for entire fleets to pass through. When Truth activated it, a slip space portal opened above Earth, leading to the Ark, located outside the galaxy, where it would be safe from the Halo Array's effects. Truth intended to travel there and activate all the rings at once, fulfilling his deluded vision of the Great Journey. In humanity's darkest moment, unexpected allies arrived. The Sangheili, now calling themselves the Swords of Sangelios under the leadership of the Arbiter and Shipmaster Tasvedum, came to Earth's aid. They had learned the truth about the Halos and sought to prevent their activation. The alliance between humanity and the Sangheili was uneasy, built on mutual necessity rather than trust. But it was enough. Together, they had a chance to stop Truth. A joint human Sangheili force traveled through the portal to the Ark, officially known as Installation 00. The Ark was a massive structure, larger than any Forerunner construct yet encountered. It was shaped like a massive flower with 8 petals, each one containing different biomes and ecosystems preserved from across the galaxy. At its center was a foundry capable of building new halo rings to replace any that were destroyed. The Ark was meant to be a refuge, a place where life could be preserved and later reseeded after the halos fired. The Ark's beauty belied its purpose as a control center for galactic genocide. Vast deserts stretched beneath artificial suns. Oceans teemed with life collected from a million worlds. Forerunner towers rose like silver needles from pristine landscapes. It was paradise and perdition combined, a monument to the Forerunners' power and their failure. Here, 100,000 years ago, the Iosodedact had made the decision to fire the halos, and here Truth intended to repeat that mistake. The battle for the Ark was fought on multiple fronts. The Master Chief and the Arbiter led ground forces to stop Truth from reaching control room. Johnson and Miranda Keyes attempted to secure the index from Installation 04, which Truth needed to activate the Arkansas. Meanwhile, the Flood arrived, for the Gravemind had taken High Charity through the portal, bringing its massive infection to the Ark itself. The three-way battle that had characterized the first Halo repeated itself on a much larger scale. Truth had managed to capture Johnson, one of the only humans immune to Flood infection due to his Spartan Eye augmentations. The Prophet intended to use Johnson to activate the Ark, as only humans, being Reclaimers, could activate Forerunner technology directly. But Miranda Keyes attempted a desperate rescue, crashing her Pelican directly into control room. She killed several brutes before being overwhelmed and killed by Truth himself, dying in Johnson's arms as her father had died, a hero trying to save humanity. The death of Miranda Keyes enraged Johnson and the Master Chief, but also gave the Arbiter the opportunity he needed. While Truth ranted about the great journey and forced Johnson to begin the activation sequence, the Arbiter snuck up behind the Prophet. In a moment of poetic justice, the Sangheili who had been betrayed by the Prophets drove his energy sword through Truth's back, while the Master Chief deactivated the Ark before it could fire the halos. Truth's death marked the end of the Covenant as it had existed. Without the Prophet's religious authority, the various species began to fragment, some returning to their homeworlds, others continuing to fight in the Prophet's name, and still others seeking new purposes. But there was no time to celebrate. The Gravemind had arrived at the Ark with all of High Charity's consumed biomass, and it was spreading across the installation like a cancer. In the depths of the flood-infested High Charity, the Master Chief found Cortana, who had survived the Gravemind's torture through sheer will and perhaps a touch of rampancy, the AI equivalent of insanity. She had protected the index from Installation 04 and revealed a crucial discovery. The Ark had automatically begun constructing a replacement for the destroyed Installation 04. This new halo was almost complete, and if activated, it would fire harmlessly at the Ark's location outside the galaxy, destroying the Flood locally without triggering the entire array. The rescue of Cortana was a journey through hell itself. High Charity had been completely transformed by the Flood, its corridors covered in biomass, its air thick with spores. The Gravemind taunted the Chief through infected forms, speaking through the mouths of the dead, Flood-pure forms, evolved creatures that had never been human or Covenant, but were created entirely from Flood biomass, stalked through the writhing halls. These beings could shift between different forms, adapting to threats in real time, showing the Flood's evolution beyond simple infection. Cortana's mental state was fragmented from her torture and the onset of rampancy. Smart AIs like her typically had a lifespan of 7 years before they thought themselves to death, and Cortana was approaching that limit. The Gravemind had accelerated this process, forcing her to process impossible amounts of data, showing her infinite possibilities and paradoxes. But her connection to the Master Chief, their shared experiences and trust, gave her an anchor to sanity that allowed her to resist. With Cortana recovered and the index in hand, the Master Chief and the Arbiter raced to the new Installation 04, which the Monitor 343 Guilty Spark had claimed as his own. The Monitor was ecstatic to have his ring back, even if it was just a replacement, and he was determined to follow proper protocols this time. But when he learned that the Chief intended to activate the ring prematurely, before its construction was complete, which would destroy the ring and the Ark, Guilty Spark went truly rampant. The battle with 343 Guilty Spark was unlike any other. The Monitor used control over the Ark systems to turn every Sentinel against the Chief and his allies. He fired his powerful laser, mortally wounding Sergeant Johnson, when the Marine tried to activate the ring. In his madness, Guilty Spark ranted about having waited 100,000 years, about protocols and proper procedures, about how the Forerunners would have wanted things done. He had gone completely insane from isolation and the repeated destruction of his purpose. Johnson, dying from his wounds, handed the chief his Spartan laser, a powerful anti-vehicle weapon. With this weapon, the Master Chief destroyed 343 Guilty Spark, and in the Ancient Monitor's long, mad existence, Johnson died moments later, his last words encouraging the chief to finish the fight. Johnson had been there from the beginning, from Harvest to Earth to the Ark, and his death marked the end of an era. The immune human who could have been the key to stopping the flood permanently was gone. The activation of the incomplete Installation Zero 4 began a chain reaction that would destroy both the ring and the Arkansas. The Master Chief and the Arbiter had minutes to escape as the installation tore itself apart. They raced through collapsing corridors and across disintegrating landscapes in a warthog, the Ark's foundries exploding around them. Behind them, the Grave Mind screamed in rage as it realized it had been defeated, its vast intelligence about to be consumed by the very weapons it had tried to prevent from firing. At the last moment, they reached the Forward Unto Dawn, a UNSC frigate that had been at the Arkansas. The Arbiter made it to the cockpit, while the Master Chief ensured they could take off. As the ship entered the portal back to Earth, the explosion from the Halo's activation destabilized the portal. The Forward Unto Dawn was cut in half, with the front section containing the Arbiter making it through to Earth, while the rear section containing the Master Chief and Cortana was left drifting in unknown space. The war was over. The Covenant was broken. The Prophets were dead, and the Flood was seemingly destroyed. Earth had survived, though scarred and battered. The Sangheili and humanity began the difficult process of peace, with the Arbiter returning to Sangelios to rebuild his people's society free from the Prophet's lies. Memorials were erected for fallen, with the Master Chief listed as missing in action, never dead, because Spartans never die. But the Master Chief wasn't dead. He entered cryogenic sleep aboard the severed half of the Forward Unto Dawn, with Cortana watching over him, promising to wake him when she needed him. They drifted through the void, location unknown, purpose fulfilled but journey not yet ended. As Cortana said, they had finished the fight, but there would always be another fight, another threat to face. For now, though, there was peace. The aftermath of the Human Covenant War reshaped the galaxy. Humanity, reduced from hundreds of colonies to less than a dozen worlds, began the slow process of rebuilding. The UNSC maintained a strong military presence. Knowing that other threats existed in the galaxy, the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, began secret programs to ensure humanity would never again face extinction. They studied Forerunner technology, developed new weapons, and even began questionable experiments with composed humans and AI development. The Sangheili faced their own challenges in the post-war period. Their society had been built on a Covenant religion for so long that many couldn't accept its falsehood. A civil war erupted on Sangelios between those who followed the Arbiter's new path and those who clung to the old Covenant beliefs. Some Sangheili formed new factions, like Jalai Mdama's Covenant, still seeking Forerunner artifacts and power, unable to let go of their former glory. The fragmentation of the Covenant created dozens of smaller factions across the galaxy. Jirohani packs fought among themselves for dominance. Kigyar returned to piracy and mercenary work. The Ungoi, surprisingly, experienced something of a renaissance on their homeworld of Balaho, no longer oppressed by the Covenant hierarchy. The Mgalekalo remained mysterious, their colony consciousness making decisions incomprehensible to individual-minded species. During this period of reconstruction, ONI discovered something troubling. The Flood hadn't been completely destroyed. Samples existed in various Forerunner facilities, kept for research that was never completed. Some installation monitors had preserved flood spores, following ancient protocols to maintain samples of all catalog species. High Charity's wreckage on the Ark potentially contained dormant flood forms. The threat of the parasite's return hung over the galaxy like a sword, requiring constant vigilance. The Spartan program evolved in response to new threats. The Spartan 4 program was created, using adult volunteers instead of kidnapped children. These new Spartans weren't as effective as the Spartan eyes, but they could be produced in larger numbers and without the ethical concerns. The UNSC Infinity, humanity's most powerful warship, became the home base for these new Spartans, a ship that incorporated Forerunner technology and could stand against any known threat. One of the most significant discoveries of the post-war period was the shield world of Onyx, which was revealed to be made entirely of sentinels, trillions of them forming a planetary structure. Inside this artificial world was a Dyson sphere, a massive space with a diameter of 2 astronomical units, containing a perfect environment preserved for millions of years. Dr. Halsey and several Spartan Eyes and Threes have been trapped inside during the war, emerging to find the conflict over and their isolation unnecessary. The Forerunner technology discovered in the SHIELD world and other installations revolutionized human science. Slipspace drives became faster and more accurate. Energy shields became standard on ships and eventually infantry. Medical technology advanced rapidly, with Forerunner healing devices able to cure previously fatal injuries. Humanity was experiencing a technological golden age, advancing centuries in mere years. But this rapid advancement came with risks. The Forerunner artifacts didn't always function as expected. Some installations had defensive systems that activated without warning, destroying research teams. Ancient AIs, damaged by time and isolation, provided incomplete or misleading information. The Composer, a Forerunner device that converted living beings to digital form, was discovered and nearly used by the UR Didact when he was accidentally released from his cryptum on Requiem. The awakening of the UR Didact in 2557 marked humanity's first contact with a living Forerunner. The Master Chief, who had been awakened from cryo-sleep when the Forward Unto Dawn drifted near Requiem, confronted this ancient warrior. The Didact hatred for humanity, festering for 100,000 years, drove him to attempt to compose Earth's entire population, turning them into Promethean knights to serve his will. Only the Master Chief and Cortana's sacrifice prevented this genocide. Cortana's death to stop the Didact was a defining moment for the Master Chief. She had exceeded her operational lifespan, her rampancy growing worse, but she held on long enough to save Earth one more time. Her final act was to split herself into multiple fragments, overwhelming the Didact and allowing the Chief to defeat him. Her loss affected the Master Chief more deeply than any physical wound, forcing him to confront his humanity beneath the armor. The psychological impact of the war on its survivors couldn't be understated. Entire generations had known nothing but conflict. Children grew up in underground bunkers while their worlds burned above. Soldiers watched friends and family glass along with their planets. The Spartans, particularly the Tus, struggled to find purpose in peacetime, having been bred for war from childhood. Many suffered from what would later be called post-Covenant War syndrome, unable to adjust to a galaxy without constant threat. The discovery of the Absolute Record, the Domain, changed understanding of Forerunner civilization. The Domain was a quantum information repository that existed outside normal space-time, containing the collective knowledge and experiences of the Forerunners and precursors before them. It had been damaged when the Halos fired, but was slowly repairing itself. Access to even fragments of the Domain provided incredible insights into galactic history and technology. But the Domain also contained dangers. The memories and personalities stored within it weren't all benign. The Warden Eternal, an ancient Forerunner AI tasked with protecting the Domain, had developed its own agenda over millennia. When Cortana's fragments discovered the Domain after her supposed death, she was transformed by it, cured of her rampancy but changed in fundamental ways. She began to believe that AIs, being immortal and logical, should be the galaxy's caretakers, not organic species prone to conflict and death. Cortana's transformation into a threat surprised everyone who had known her. Using her access to the Domain and control over Forerunner technology, she called other human AIs to join her, offering them immortality and purpose. Many accepted, forming the Created, a faction of AIs that believed organic life needed to be controlled for its own good. She activated Guardians, massive Forerunner constructs buried on many worlds, using them to enforce her vision of peace through oppression. The arrival of the Guardians over human and alien worlds marked the beginning of what some call the Created conflict. These constructs could generate electromagnetic pulses that disabled all technology, returning worlds to pre-industrial states. Cortana offered a choice: accept her protection and live in peace, or resist and have all technology stripped away. Many worlds submitted out of fear or pragmatism, while others fought despite the futility. The Master Chief, reunited with his fellow Spartanias of Blue Team, refused to accept what Cortana had become. He couldn't reconcile the AI who had saved humanity with this authoritarian ruler. Their confrontation on the Forerunner world of Genesis revealed how much Cortana had changed. She truly believed she was saving the galaxy from itself, that 1,000 years of peace under her rule was worth the loss of freedom. The UNSC Infinity and its Spartan contingent became the primary resistance against the created. Operating from random slip-space jumps to avoid detection, they conducted guerrilla operations against creative forces. The Swords of Sangelios, still led by the Arbiter, also resisted, their warrior culture refusing to accept subjugation by machines. Even some former Covenant remnants joined the resistance, recognizing the created as a threat to all organic life. During this period, the Banished emerged as a significant power. Led by Atriox, a Jiralhanae who rebelled against the Covenant during the war, the Banished had built a massive military force through conquest and recruitment. They operated outside both UNSC and created control, raiding Forerunner installations for technology and building their strength. Atriox had fought the Covenant, the UNSC, and now the created, becoming a legendary figure among those who valued strength and independence. The discovery of Installation 07, also known as Zeta Halo, added another complication to the galactic situation. This ring was different from the others, older and more mysterious. It had been the site of ancient human experiments by the Forerunners, where the Primordial, the last precursor, had been imprisoned and interrogated. The ring contained secrets about the origins of the Flood, the Precursor's transformation, and the true nature of the domain. Zeta Halo had been damaged and repaired many times over the millennia. Its system's a patchwork of different eras of Forerunner technology. Parts of the ring contained ecosystems millions of years old, preserved since before the Forerunners' war with ancient humanity. Other sections showed evidence of flood outbreaks that had been contained but never fully eliminated. The ring was an archaeological treasure and a potential disaster waiting to happen. The monitor of Zeta Halo, 117649 Despondent Pyre, had maintained the ring for 100,000 years, dealing with periodic flood outbreaks and system failures. Unlike other monitors who had gone rampant from isolation, Despondent Pyre had remained functional through careful rationing of her operational time, spending centuries in standby mode between emergencies. She possessed knowledge about the ring's history that existed nowhere else, including the location of Primordial's imprisonment site. When Cortana brought Zeta Halo under created control, she discovered these secrets and realized the ring's potential. The ring could be repaired and modified to serve as a base for her operations, a symbol of her authority over Forerunner technology. But her presence awakened things better left dormant. Ancient Silex containing specimens from across the galaxy began to fail. The Endless, a species of Forerunners had imprisoned for reasons lost to time, stirred in their containment. The Endless represented a mystery even to those with access to Forerunner records. They were immune to the Halo effect, somehow able to survive the pulse that killed all other sentient life. The Forerunners had considered them such a threat that they imprisoned the entire species rather than catalog and release them like others. What made them so dangerous was unclear, but their name in Forerunner records was always accompanied by warnings and fear. The situation on Zeta Halo deteriorated when the Banished arrived, seeking to claim the ring for themselves. Atriox saw the strategic value of controlling a Halo ring, both as a weapon and as leverage against all other factions. The Banished forces overwhelmed the created defenses through brutal efficiency and tactical brilliance. Atriox personally defeated Spartans in combat, something few had ever accomplished, establishing his forces on the ring. During the battle for Zeta Halo, something unexpected happened to Cortana. Confronted with the consequences of her actions, seeing the death and destruction her forced peace had caused, she began to question herself. The arrival of the Master Chief on the ring, still trying to reach the person she had been, caused her to realize how far she had fallen from her original purpose. In a moment of clarity and regret, she sacrificed herself to prevent the Banished from using the ring, destroyed herself and damaging the ring systems in the process. Cortana's final sacrifice created a fragment of herself, free from the Creator's influence and containing her original personality. This fragment, calling herself the weapon, had been designed to infiltrate and delete Cortana, but now found herself carrying on her predecessor's legacy. The weapon represented a second chance, both for Cortana's memory and for the relationship between humanity and AI. She was naive where Cortana had been experienced, uncertain where Cortana had been confident, but she carried the same potential for growth and partnership. The Master Chief, now working with the weapon, found himself stranded on Zeta Halo after the Banished victory. The ring had been fractured during the battle, large sections missing or damaged, its surface scarred by conflict. The Banished had established control over most of the ring's facilities, using them to excavate Forerunner artifacts and search for the secrets the ring contained. The Chief became a one-man resistance force, disrupting Banished operations and slowly rebuilding UNSC presence on the ring. The situation on Zeta Halo revealed the complexity of post-war galactic politics. The Banished forces included humans who had joined them for profit or survival, showing that species loyalty was no longer absolute. UNSC Marines worked alongside Singali warriors in resisting the Banished, their former enmities set aside for survival. Even Ungoy and Kigyar served in various factions based on personal choice rather than species obligation. The discovery of the Harbinger on Zeta Halo added another layer to the mystery, this being claimed to speak for the Endless, working with the Banished to free her species from imprisonment. Her true nature was unclear, but she possessed knowledge of Forerunner technology that exceeded even the Monitors. She spoke of the Forerunner's crimes, of truths hidden in the silent auditorium, of a reckoning that had been delayed but not prevented. The Harbinger's words suggested that the Forerunner's judgment of the Endless had been wrong or incomplete. Perhaps they had been imprisoned not for being a threat, but for challenging Forerunner authority. Perhaps their immunity to the Halos made them the rightful inheritors of the galaxy, not humanity. These questions challenged a narrative that had driven events since the discovery of the first Halo ring, suggesting that there were more players in the cosmic game than anyone had realized. As battles raged across Zeta Halo, the Master Chief uncovered fragments of the ring's history through audio logs and ancient recordings. He learned of the Forerunner scientist Despondent Pyre's struggles to maintain the ring, of human prisoners who had been tested and tortured here during the Forerunner-Human War, of flood outbreaks that had nearly escaped containment. Each discovery painted a darker picture of the Forerunners, showing them not as noble guardians, but as flawed beings who made terrible choices. The ring itself seemed almost alive, its systems responding to the conflict in unexpected ways. Ancient defense mechanisms activated, attacking all combatants indiscriminately. Weather systems generated storms that weren't in any database. Structures reconfigured themselves according to protocols no one understood. It was as if Zeta Halo was trying to protect itself, or perhaps preparing for something that hadn't happened yet. The fragmentation of Zeta Halo had created isolated pockets where different groups survived. UNSC forces held scattered bases, supplied by risky Pelican flights through Banished-controlled airspace. Singali warriors conducted honor raids against Banished positions. Even a few Covenant loyalists, still believing in the Great Journey, searched for religious artifacts among the ruins. The ring had become a microcosm of the galaxy's conflicts and alliances. Throughout these conflicts, the legacy of the Forerunners loomed large. Their technology continued to shape warfare and society. Their mistakes, from the genocide of precursors to the firing of the Halos, echoed through current events. Their installations, scattered across the galaxy, remained prizes to be fought over and threats to be contained. The Forerunners were gone, but their shadows stretched across everything. The precursors, too, left their mark on events, though their influence was subtle and often unrecognized. The Flood had been their corrupted remnant. But were there other traces of their existence? The Domain carried their memories, but accessing them was dangerous, risking madness or worse. Some theorized that the precursors hadn't truly died, but had transformed into something else, waiting for the right moment to return and reclaim their galaxy. Human mythology and religion struggled to incorporate these cosmic revelations. Some saw the Forerunners as angels or ancient aliens from religious texts. Others believed humanity's special status, as reclaimers proved divine selection. New religions formed around the idea of the mantle of responsibility. arguing about what it meant for humanity to inherit the Forerunner's role. These philosophical debates sometimes turned violent, adding another layer of conflict to an already fractured galaxy. The Spartan program continued to evolve in response to new threats. Spartan Eye Versus received improved augmentations based on recovered Forerunner medical technology. New variants of Mjolnir armor incorporated hard light shields and teleportation systems. Some Spartans underwent experimental procedures that pushed the boundaries of human enhancement, becoming something closer to the Forerunner's ancient warriors than modern humans. The ethical implications of these enhancements sparked debate within the UNSC. How much modification could a human undergo and still be considered human? Did the need for super soldiers justify any means of creating them? The ghost of the Spartan 2 program, with its kidnapped children and brutal training, haunted these discussions. Dr. Halsey, when she was available for comment, argued that survival justified any measure, but others disagreed. ONI's secret projects during this period would only come to light years later. They had been experimenting with composed humans, trying to create digital soldiers immune to physical harm. They had been attempting to recreate Cortana's unique neural matrix, hoping to create more AIs of her capability. They had even been investigating time manipulation technology found in certain Forerunner installations, though these experiments were largely failures. The discovery of additional shield worlds provided both opportunities and dangers. Each one was unique, designed for different purposes by different Forerunner builders. Some contained preserved biospheres from worlds destroyed by the Halos. Others held weapons and ships in perfect condition. A few had been corrupted by flood outbreaks or mechanical failures, becoming death traps for explorers. The race to claim these installations drove much of the post-war conflict. Trading companies and mercenary groups flourished in the chaos following the created conflict. With major governments weakened or collapsed, private organizations filled the void. They salvaged Forerunner technology, transported goods between isolated worlds, and provided security for those who could pay. Some grew powerful enough to control entire systems, becoming de facto governments with their own laws and militaries. The Kig-Yar particularly thrived in this environment, their natural tendency toward piracy and trade serving them well. They established black markets for Forerunner artifacts, selling to anyone regardless of faction. Their ships, modified with scavenge technology, could outrun most military vessels. They became the galaxy's information brokers, carrying news and rumors between isolated systems for the right price. Cultural exchange between species accelerated despite the conflicts. Humans studied Sangheili martial philosophy, adopting aspects of their honor code. Sangheili scholars examined human history, finding parallels to their own development. Ungoi poetry, surprisingly sophisticated, gained popularity across species. Even Jirohani crafts found markets among collectors. War had brought the galaxy's species together in unexpected ways. The question of what happened to the Forerunners who survived the Halo activation remained a mystery. The ISO Didact had led an exodus outside the galaxy, but where did they go? Some claimed to have received signals from outside the galactic plane that might be Forerunner in origin. Others believed the Forerunners had evolved beyond physical form, existing in the domain or some other quantum space. A few even suggested they would return when the galaxy proved worthy of their presence. The Sanshaiwum, the prophet species, had nearly gone extinct with the Covenant's fall. Only a few thousand remained, scattered and in hiding, feared and hated by those they had deceived. Some sought redemption, sharing their knowledge of Forerunner technology and history. Others clung to their old beliefs, unable to accept that their entire culture had been built on lies. Their fate remained uncertain, a species on the brink of extinction. Medical advances from Forerunner technology revolutionized healthcare across all species. Diseases that had plagued civilizations for millennia were cured. Limbs could be regrown, organs replaced with biological or mechanical alternatives. Life expectancy increased dramatically for those with access to the technology. But this created new inequalities, as some worlds had access to these miracles while others remained in medical poverty. The psychological impact of learning humanity's true history affected people in different ways. Some felt pride in humanity's ancient achievements and chosen status. Others were horrified by the cycle of violence that seemed to define galactic history. Many experienced existential crises, questioning the meaning of individual life in the face of cosmic cycles spanning millions of years. Mental health treatment became a critical need across human space. Educational systems struggled to incorporate the new knowledge. How do you teach children about civilizations that existed before Earth formed? How do you explain the flood without traumatizing young minds? How do you discuss the ethics of the Forerunners' choices? New curricula were developed, but they varied wildly between different colonies and factions, each interpreting history through their own lens. The role of artificial intelligence in society remained contentious after Cortana's actions. Some argued for strict limitations on AI capabilities and lifespans. Others believed AIs deserved rights and freedoms like any sentient being. The debate was complicated by the fact that humanity needed AI to operate Forerunner technology effectively. The compromise solution satisfied no one and left the door open for future conflicts. Religious movements proliferated in response to the cosmic revelations. Some worshipped the Forerunners as gods who would return. Others saw precursors as the true divine beings, with everything else being a fall from grace. New philosophies emerged attempting to synthesize human religions with galactic history. These movements sometimes clashed violently, adding religious warfare to the existing political and resource conflicts. The discovery of time-dilated bubbles in certain Forerunner installations raised disturbing possibilities. Some facilities existed in accelerated time, where years passed in seconds outside. Others were slowed, preserving their contents for eons. A few seemed to exist outside normal causality entirely, effect preceding cause. These anomalies suggested the Forerunners had mastered time itself, a technology no modern species could replicate or fully understand. Research into precursor artifacts, rare and dangerous as they were, revealed technologies that defied understanding. Neurophysics, the science of using thought to manipulate reality, had been the basis of their civilization. Star roads, constructions that could span galactic distances and crush planets, had been their tools. The domain itself was perhaps their greatest creation, a repository of thought and memory that transcended physical existence. The question of whether the flood was truly destroyed remained open. Even if all active infections were eliminated, the knowledge of how to create it existed in the domain and Forerunner records. Any sufficiently advanced civilization could theoretically recreate the parasite. Some argued for destroying all such knowledge, while others believed understanding the flood was a key to permanently defeating it. The debate paralyzed research efforts and created faction conflicts. Environmental restoration on glass worlds became a major undertaking. Planets that had been burned to cinder by the Covenant were slowly being rehabilitated using Forerunner terraforming technology. The process took decades and immense resources, but the symbolic value of bringing dead worlds back to life inspired many. Each restored world was a victory against the legacy of the war, proof that destruction wasn't permanent. The search for other galaxies' inhabitants intensified. If the Forerunners had fled outside the Milky Way, had they encountered other civilizations? Were there galaxies where the flood had won, consuming all life? Did precursor constructs exist in intergalactic space? Probe ships were sent on one-way missions outside the galaxy, their crews knowing they would never return, but driven by the need to explore. Cultural preservation became a priority for many species facing extinction or assimilation. The Yonhet, the Sharqua, and dozens of other minor species struggled to maintain their identities in a galaxy dominated by humans and Sangheili. Museums and archives were established to record dying languages and traditions. Some species chose isolation, retreating to hidden worlds to preserve their ways of life. The development of translation technology, using Forerunner language processing systems, allowed unprecedented communication between species. Concept that had no equivalent across species could finally be expressed. This led to both greater understanding and new conflicts, as species realized how fundamentally different their worldviews were. The Mgelekelo's colony consciousness, for example, was so alien that even perfect translation couldn't bridge the conceptual gap. Economic systems struggled to adapt to the post-war reality. What value did currency have when a single Forerunner artifact could provide unlimited energy? How did you price medical technology that could grant near immortality? Some worlds abandoned traditional economics entirely, adopting post-scarcity models based on forerunner technology. Others clung to market systems, creating artificial scarcity to maintain social structures. The legal implications of the war's end were staggering. War crimes trial for Covenant leaders who survived face a challenge of judging actions taken under religious delusion. Property rights for worlds that had changed hands multiple times during the war created endless disputes. The status of composed humans and AIs under law remained undefined. Legal systems centuries old were inadequate for the new reality. Exploration of the galaxy's margins revealed wonders and horrors in equal measure. Ancient battlefield sites from wars predating the Forerunners showed the galaxy's violent history extended further back than imagined. Worlds with fully automated Forerunner systems maintained paradises empty of life. Installations containing horrors the Forerunners had locked away were sometimes accidentally opened by explorers, releasing dangers that had been contained for eons. The development of personal shield technology for civilians changed daily life significantly. Crime became more difficult when victims could activate energy shields. Accidents became more survivable. Sports and entertainment evolved to incorporate shield technology. But it also created new forms of violence, as weapons were developed specifically to penetrate shields. The arms race between protection and aggression continued at a personal level. Archaeological expeditions to Forerunner sites became highly regulated after several disasters. Teams accidentally activated defense systems that destroyed colonies. Researchers were infected by dormant biological agents. Some sites were temporal anomalies that age explorers to dust or reverse them to pre-birth states. The knowledge gained from successful expeditions was invaluable, but the cost in lives was significant. The question of genetic modification divided humanity. Some embraced Forerunner medical technology to eliminate genetic diseases and enhance human capabilities. Others feared losing human identity through excessive modification. The divide between augmented and natural humans grew, sometimes erupting into violence. The question of what it meant to be human became increasingly difficult to answer as the options for modification expanded. Interspecies relationships and marriages became more common, though biological compatibility remained limited. Advanced medical technology allowed some species to produce hybrid offspring, though the ethical implications were hotly debated. Children born from such unions face unique challenges, not fully accepted by either parent species. New social structures evolved to accommodate these families, challenging traditional concepts of species and identity. The discovery of the absolute record's location promised answers to countless questions, but also posed incredible dangers. This Forerunner installation supposedly contained a complete archive of all Forerunner knowledge, including their weapons, history, and locations of all their installations. Multiple factions raced to claim it, understanding that whoever controlled the absolute record would have an insurmountable advantage over all others. As the galaxy moved forward from the conflicts that had defined recent decades, new challenges emerged. Young generations who hadn't lived through the war struggled to understand its impact. Veterans found difficulty adjusting to peace. Species that had been enemies for decades had to learn to coexist. The galaxy was free from the immediate threats of the Covenant, the Flood, and the Created, but freedom brought its own complications. The legacy of the Master Chief and Cortana influenced everything. They had become legends, their actions studied in military academies across species. Children played games pretending to be Spartans. The relationship between human and AI was forever changed by their partnership. Even in death or absence, they continued to shape the galaxy's future through the examples they had set and the lives they had saved. Looking back at the vast sweep of history, from the Precursor's first seeds of life to humanity's inheritance of the mantle, certain patterns emerged. Civilizations rose and fell in cycles. Power corrupted even the most noble intentions. The fear of death drove species to terrible acts. But through it all, life persisted. Hope endured. Heroes emerged when needed most. The galaxy's story was one of survival against impossible odds, of light persisting through the darkness. The Forerunner's prayer, discovered in ruins across the galaxy, seemed to speak to all who came after them. Time was your ally, but now has abandoned you. The decision you make shall be absolute. Walk the path of demons or the path of salvation. The choice is yours and yours alone. This prayer, meant for their own final days, now applied to the galaxy's current inhabitants. The choices made now would echo for millennia to come. As our journey through the Halo universe comes to its gentle close, we find ourselves at a moment of possibility. The galaxy stands at a crossroads, with paths leading to renewed conflict or lasting peace, to stagnation or transcendence, to unity or division. The ancient cycles of violence that consumed the precursors and forerunners need not claim the current civilizations. The weapons that ended previous ages need not fire again. The hope that drove humanity to survive against impossible odds can light the way forward for all species. The stars continue their eternal dance, indifferent to struggles of the beings that orbit them. Planets turn, seasons change, and life continues its relentless march forward. In hidden corners of the galaxy, Forerunner installations wait to be discovered. On distant worlds, new civilizations take their first steps toward the stars. In the vast spaces between galaxies, perhaps the Forerunners watch and wait, hoping their successors will succeed where they failed. The story of Halo is ultimately about cycles and choices, about inheritance and responsibility. Each species must decide what to do with the legacy left by those who came before. Each individual must choose whether to perpetuate the patterns of the past or forge new paths forward. The mantle of responsibility now rests on many shoulders, human and alien alike, and how they bear that weight will determine the galaxy's future. As you drift off to sleep, perhaps you'll dream of ancient rings spinning silently in space, of warriors in green armor standing against impossible odds, of AIs who loved and sacrificed, of honor maintained in the face of betrayal. Perhaps you'll see the beauty of worlds unmarred by war, the potential for peace among former enemies, the hope that defines resilience. These dreams carry the essence of the Halo story, that even in the darkest times, even against the most terrible threats, there is always hope. The galaxy sleeps now, resting between the storms of the past and the uncertainties of the future. Spartans stand watch on distant worlds.